the market has changed in a way that we're now looking for very different talents than in the past, or let's say talents with different skills. China has always been, let's go back the past 3 decades, right? The company were facing the golden times, right? Always growing. And since the pandemic, starting in 2020, we have experienced a downturn. So companies are facing tough competition, local competition nowadays, also producing quality products, probably to a cheaper price or offering this on a cheaper price in the market. So Western companies, foreign companies have faced this challenge of competing now. This, of course, also have an impact on their business.
Welcome to a new episode of Business Meets Life. And today we're speaking in English, although you have 3 Germans in front of you. Although I gotta say, you two don't look that German. So welcome, Hsiao, Martin. Thank you so much for making time. Hsiao is joining us from Shanghai, Martin from Düsseldorf, Germany. Now, tell us a little bit, how did you two actually end up meeting and having one company together, bridging like Europe and Asia and headhunting? What's your story?
Well, maybe I start, but maybe Martin, then you can take over. First of all, thank you, Janine, for having us here. Yes, and greetings from Shanghai. I can just start, and then perhaps Martin, you take over from there. We actually met in the elevator in Shanghai, right? And then the story started there. Maybe you take over, Martin.
Okay, yes, we met in the elevator, but actually it was clear that we are going to work together. So to simplify the story, I basically relocated to Shanghai in 2009, and then I started a new job at a company where Hsiao was already employed. At that time, of course, I was looking for an apartment, and then that's where I bumped into Hsiao because he was also looking, I think, for an apartment in the same building. But it was clear that we were going to work in the company prior to our meeting in the elevator.
Wow, that is such a cute little story. In the elevator, who did the elevator pitch is the question. Yes?
I think I did because I recognized him. Yeah, so that was the first time where we really personally met. Before that, we had talks, we had video chats, right? But I recognized him and I said, "Hey, you are Martin, right? And welcome to Shanghai."
What a nice story. So how, at the end, okay, you guys started working together, but how did it happen that you actually co-founded a company together? And I mean, nowadays, like your company is in Switzerland, in Germany, in China, in Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam. Did I forget another country?
I think that's it, yeah.
For now.
Basically whole Southeast Asia plus Greater China.
Yes. How did that happen?
How did it happen? As Martin mentioned, so we were colleagues for some years, and working in a recruitment company. Of course, one day the question might come up: what's the next step? So I spent almost 7 years in my previous company, and got to a point where, of course, I also thought about, okay, what's the next step for myself? In this case, since Martin and me have not only been colleagues, but somehow also we're friends. Yeah, so I involved him in my ideas, and basically he has a similar idea. So that was the start of our entrepreneurship. Yeah, so starting our own business then in 2013.
All right. Now I have something popping up. Can friends actually successfully work together? I think this is always like this kind of like debate. We Germans, we love to separate private and work life. Whereas here in China, we always say like, oh yeah, we want to do business with friends. Is that possible, or is it better to separate it?
I think it's possible, but again, you need to remember that we met as colleagues, right? So it's not that Hsiao is my childhood friend from primary school. So we met in work, so we knew the working style, the workflow of each other, which is a good foundation for founding a company. But on top of this, of course, Hsiao and I also became friends. But I think it's easier this way around than if just two good friends start a company and then feel we're great friends, but actually we cannot do business together.
Yes, and I would like to add, we are basically, if you know us, right, you will find out we have different personalities, but what really brings us together. We are aligning on the things which matters, right? The way how we want to do our business, what is important for us if we hire people. So basically, we share the same idea how we want to do this, but from different perspectives, and also basically using our different strengths and compensating our different weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Talking about your strengths and your weaknesses, I mean, with diverse teams, we're always looking for like synergies, yin and yang. So who of you two has which, like, who of you is taking over in which situation in a company?
A very clear point. Although I'm also from Düsseldorf, I'm not very good at drinking. So this is definitely a part when we talk about, hey, going to have a drink, enjoying an evening with drinks with friends, with clients, right? Of course, Martin is much better than I am. Yeah. Just to start with my own weakness.
Do you have many years of training, not only in China?
I've tried, but in China sometimes you cannot avoid drinking. Yeah, so I'm a social drinker in that aspect. But again, that's definitely not my strong suit.
Martin, anything you want to add here? On how
All
you
jokes aside,
complement?
actually, we don't like strictly separate. Let's say, Xiao is more focusing on the finance. I'm more focused on the operation. So we have a lot of overlapping strengths and weaknesses. But somehow at the end, of course, it compensates. But we do not actually strictly distinguish between our tasks. So our tasks are actually pretty similar, especially now since we're also based in two different countries. I would say we pretty much do the same, but of course, everybody has certain strong points and things he likes to do more or less.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you quickly tell us, please, what is your cultural background? I mean, looking at you, we can see there must be some kind of mix.
Well, if I tell you about the history of my family in Europe, yeah, it dates back 90 years ago, so it might occupy perhaps an hour of this podcast. But let me briefly summarize, maybe. So it started with my grandfather, who ended up in Europe in the late 30s, yeah, and he actually, yeah, was pretty much an adventure to leave China in the 30s, right? To go to Europe. We didn't have, or at that time was not very common to take a plane to Europe, right? So he took a ship. Took I think several months, and he ended up somewhere in Europe. Made his way through Bulgaria, Italy, and finally ended up in Düsseldorf, earning his money through selling socks and helping people to carry their luggages at the railway station. That's how how he started his career in Germany, and eventually in the late 50s, early 60s, he moved to Düsseldorf and established the first Chinese restaurant in Düsseldorf, and that was, of course, at that time something very special. You can imagine something very exotic, attracting many people who have never heard of Chinese food or have never tasted Chinese food. And that's how eventually he became some kind of a local celebrity over there. And in the course of this time, my parents followed in the 60s, in the mid 60s, in the late 60s, also not taking a plane, but also taking the route from Macau on a ship to Germany. And my parents, they were from a small hometown, small town in Zhejiang province. So basically, I visited that place where my parents met the first time. There was no electricity, no flowing water. My mother herself, she was illiterate. She never attended school. My father attended primary school, and they made it to Germany. Lived there for 40 years. Also, of course, running a restaurant, but at the same time, also taking care of 7 kids. So that's the background. I was born in Germany, so different from my 3 elder siblings who were born and brought up in China. I was born in Germany, so I grew up with German as my native language as well as a Chinese dialect. It's Qingtianhua. And I decided to go back to find my roots, basically. And that's when I decided in 2004 to move to Hong Kong. and 2 years later then to Shanghai, so 2006. So basically you can say I'm German, I'm Chinese. People always ask me, are you German, are you Chinese? And I say, hey, it depends. If you look at my face, if you check my blood, you will find out it's Chinese blood, it's a Chinese face. If you ask me about the way you're thinking and perhaps also your value system, I would say it's rather more German. But it's not easy just to limit yourself to being a Chinese or being German. I would say I'm pretty much a global citizen.
Interesting. Now, Martin, what about you? Wow, I got goosebumps when you told your story.
Okay. Well, mine is pretty simple. So I have a German mother. So my grandparents, they come here from the Ruhrgebiet, so northern Westphalia. And my dad is a Indonesian Chinese. So his parents, maybe 100 years ago, basically they emigrated from Guangdong province to Indonesia, like many other Chinese. And then my father was born, you can say, as an overseas Chinese in Indonesia. And then my dad studied in Germany in the 60s, where he met my mom. By matter of fact, actually, I was born in Indonesia because my father worked for a couple of years in Indonesia, but then I returned to Germany by the age of 3. So I pretty much grew up as a German kid, I would say, even though second language was actually Bahasa, so Indonesian language, not Chinese. And later, similar to Hsiao, also had a strong interest to go back to the roots, not only, but also because of my grandparents. And then I attended university here in Duisburg-Essen with some Chinese courses, and also spent 6 months in Shanghai, also at university and an internship. So similar to Hsiao, actually, I try to also get to know more about my roots as an adult.
Wow, this is so interesting. So I can definitely see we have the right people we're talking to when it comes to bridging Europe and Asia. I just got back from Bali last week. Wow, what a wonderful place. Now, I have a question. Recruiting, headhunting. Some people say, everybody nowadays is a recruiter, is doing headhunting. If you don't know what job you want to do, become a headhunter, recruiter. I'm pretty sure it's not as simple as it sounds like. How, and you guys have been successful for decades now. What exactly does a headhunter or a recruitment consultant do?
I was as clueless as you are, or you're not anymore, Janine, right? So I was clueless when I was, I actually started in 2004 when I met a very seasoned headhunter who just opened an office in Shanghai. And we got to know each other, and he somehow offered me the job to go to Shanghai. Well, at that time, I had another job offer in Hong Kong, so I chose Hong Kong first. But nevertheless, he was very much, insisting and visited me a couple of times in Hong Kong until he really convinced me to join his company. But at that time, I had no idea. I had no idea what headhunting was about. So for me, it was like perhaps it's just collecting some CVs from some strangers, right? Asking some questions and then forwarding the CVs to the client. But at the end of the day, it turned out, of course, to be very, very different, very, very comprehensive. So what do we do? At the end of the day, we are, yes, as a headhunter, we are assigned by companies who have let's say, a hard to fill position, or I would say a strategically or a key position they would like to hire. And they've probably also tried a lot of different methods and different ways to find and hire this person. At the end of the day, they were not successful, and then they turn us and assign us. So basically, our job is then to sit down, get an understanding of the requirements, but also share our experience, our input with our clients so that we can target the right candidates. I can perhaps elaborate on this a little bit later about the differences, right? Because our clients in Asia are mainly, let's say, European companies / German-speaking companies, and hiring people, most of them Asians, Chinese. Of course, we have this cultural gap, of course, if we talk about assessing the people correctly, interviewing the people correctly, right? So at the end of the day, our job is actively supporting our clients to not only identify the right people, but also selecting and winning these people for our clients. You can imagine in a very competitive environment where basically all the big companies, all the famous companies are pitching for the same talents, that it's could be quite challenging to convince a candidate to join, for example, a hidden champion, right? And we basically accompany our clients throughout the whole recruitment process, again, which starts with fine-tuning the requirements, the active sourcing part, the interviewing, the assessment part, as well as negotiation. And basically, I can tell you throughout this the whole process, the clients have a lot of questions asking about how to assess people, how to interpret certain behaviors, how to interpret certain answers, right? So this is basically also our part as consultants and sometimes also advisors to our clients.
Martin, so can you tell us a little bit more on how is actually like the job market or like the industries, how are they changing nowadays? If we look at China and Southeast Asia, do we have some specific trends? I mean, everybody sees the economy isn't going well, but can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, I'd like to just say, if you see it from the macroeconomic point of view, of course, you see a certain shift of, let's say, European FDIs, foreign direct investments, which are maybe now not going to China anymore, but into the other Asian countries. Yeah, we call it China plus one. Yeah, or the topic is supply chain resilience. Yeah, to make your supply chain resilient and making sure that no matter what's happening, that you will be able basically maybe to deliver your goods from your factories in Asia, let's say to the US, to other countries without any special tariffs. Yeah, that's the reason why a couple of quite a lot of German companies now heavily investing in Southeast Asia. In general, of course, COVID-19, yeah, the pandemic was a big game changer also here in Europe for the whole labor market. So attitude of people totally changed. Yeah, especially in Europe. I think a lot of candidates now, they at least require 2, sometimes 3 days of home office. Yeah, so each interview running now, it's already given or taken for granted that people can stay 2 days at home. I think maybe in Shanghai, it's not that severe, but there's also slight tendencies in Asia that people say, I want to work flexible. And yeah, this is the result, I guess, of COVID-19. But in general, of course, we're now talking about an economic environment which is not that great, especially in China. So I think Hsiao can later also elaborate on this, but I think at the moment, the market has changed from a very candidate-driven market, which it has been the last 10, 15 years or since I've been in this business. But now maybe it's more, again, I wouldn't say an employer market, but the candidates are more thoughtful when changing jobs, and there are not so many good jobs available anymore for a certain group of people.
Yeah, I'm glad to pick up from you, Martin, because I can also share perhaps some changes which I've experienced. I've been here now in Shanghai for almost 20 years doing this job, and as Martin just mentioned, it has shifted from a candidate market now back to an employer market. But I think the most significant trend, in fact, is that the market has changed in a way that we're now looking for very different talents than in the past, or let's say talents with different skills. China has always been, let's go back the past 3 decades, right? So the company were facing the golden times, right? Always growing. And since the pandemic, so starting in 2020, we have experienced a downturn. So companies are facing, let's say, tough competition, right? We have a lot of local competition nowadays, also producing quality products, right? Probably to a cheaper price or offering this on a cheaper price in the market. So Western companies, foreign companies have faced this challenge of competing now with these new competitors. And this will, of course, also have an impact on their business. So during the golden times, I usually always come up with this example of you could basically hire a monkey as a general manager, and the company was still profitable, right? Was still running profitable, not because the monkey was very skillful, but the market. Yeah, the demand was so high. Now we're facing, if you go through the business cycle, right, starting with the startup phase, the maturity phase, developing, growing phase, the maturity phase, and then the decline. It's the first time in China that we're facing, or in our generation, that we're facing decline. So the requirements of companies, or let's say the requirements we have regarding candidate skills, is to manage a turnaround. And you can imagine, since we haven't had this time in China and in this generation, we have hardly people who have this experience, right? And the other trend and the other change I have experienced personally is also how careful, how cautious people are in regards to changing their job. You can imagine maybe 10 years ago, you ask somebody, hey, I might have a job opportunity. They immediately send their CV. Nowadays, they ask a lot of questions. They want to know a lot about the company's background, how the company has been developing in the past years, and what is the future strategy. So they are very, very cautious, yeah, and also do a more thorough investigation and research regarding the company. So you can imagine for us means this is a challenge to really convince potential candidates to consider this job change.
Wow, that sounds super challenging now. Do you have any tips, number one, for, let's say, the employers who usually would hire JP Contagi, your company? And then number two, do you have specific tips for potential candidates? Like looking at, like from a German perspective, like automotive. I know a lot of, as a career advisor, of course, I know a lot of people who are also now considering to change their job, or they know that sooner or later maybe they will lose their job, and they are facing challenges. They've been maybe incorporated with this company for a very, very long time. Yeah, please share some advice for the employers, your clients, as well as the candidates or potential
Shall I
candidates.
start with the candidates? Martin, you take over the employer then, the employer side. Let me start with the candidate. I mean, in such an economic environment, you can imagine I almost get 3, 4 calls every month from people, not every month, bi-weekly, from people who are actively looking for a job. So they ask me, of course, also for advice. And the advice, the most important advice I give them, of course, think about what is the value that you can contribute to a company. This is the first thing you need to understand, because a hiring decision is made up by a very simple formula. It's input versus output, which is the definition of, I would say, a simple definition of value. So regardless of your age, regardless of where you're from, at the end of the day, it comes down to the value that you can contribute, that the company can gain from your employment. Value could also be somebody, for example, who is very jolly, has a very jolly nature and brings in a nice atmosphere, or let's say strengthen the team cohesion, right? But of course, it could also be the relevant network which you can utilize for a company. So here at the end of the day, think about in what role, in what position, in which company, in what kind of setup you can bring for a company. So at the end of the day, the company again will probably hire the person where they assign the highest value for the candidates.
Very good. So it means that in our applications, we really got to make sure that we show the value, the output we can basically bring to the company and how we can contribute. Thank you, Hsiao. So Martin, what about the employers? Some advice for them, for your future clients who are going to hire you.
Yeah, well, in general, I mean, companies, of course, due to financial pressure, especially if they are stock listed and have to basically look at shareholder value, they tend to panic, yeah, or to basically do mass layoffs and cut positions. I mean, during crisis, which they know that they will be needed very, very soon. Yeah, let's say software engineering, etc. So I think every crisis also offers a lot of opportunities to use the momentum and now get very talented people from the market, which are normally maybe not that available. Yeah, look, like 6 months or 18 months ago here in Germany, we had full employment and it was impossible to get anyone. Yeah? But at the moment, it's changing, and there's also a chance now to really see, have a vision into the future and get these people from the market, even though at the moment maybe your market share is shrinking, but to work a bit anti-clockwise or basically against the current cycle. But do not panic and do mass layoffs now and later. Basically, you don't have the capability anymore to develop, to market, to sell your your products. Yeah, but of course, especially big companies, they're very much capital market driven, and the pressure is of course enormous. But our clients are mostly small, medium-sized enterprise, mostly family owned, and I think they have the liberty to basically work differently. They're not so much under financial pressure from, let's say, shareholders or private equity activists. Yeah.
What are the most common positions that you are hiring for, or like that you have to find for your clients in Asia or in Europe?
Yeah. It's the general management, so basically general manager or managing director, and of course, let's say the head of finance, head of sales, but mostly the management positions. I would say this is the most common. These are the most common projects what we are doing.
Now, in a lot of like I know I'm working with a lot of hotels and other companies, and I could really see that there was a big shift from maybe the head used to be a foreigner, an expat. Now they're replacing it with local Chinese, for example. I don't know how it is for like Thailand and Vietnam. Is this like for your clients? Is that also a trend, or do they still have foreign heads in their foreign entities in Asia?
So maybe on China.
China, of course, there is, I would say, going back in time 5 years ago, so when the pandemic started, already there had already been this kind of localization also in regards to hiring people, right? But this has sped up tremendously, accelerated tremendously after the pandemic. So here we can see localization almost in every company. So particularly in tier one cities where there is where we have a lot of talents, right? Local Chinese who have studied overseas. So here we see a tremendous change and a shift to local hiring locals for positions which were occupied by foreigners. If you ask me if this is how I see this trend, I would say still a company requires more, I would say, a certain level of diversity. So there are still certain opportunities for foreigners. Again, come back to the value proposition an individual can or has, right, which he can basically bring to a company. But yes, in China, there's a clear trend, localization of headcounts.
I see. What about the other countries like Vietnam and Thailand and so on?
I would say in general, it depends on the company. I mean, China, of course, is a comparatively mature market in Asia, and you just have a lot of local talent with very good education. Yeah? So let's say Chinese that studied abroad, been working for Western companies for 10, 20 years. So you don't have this talent pool in other Asian countries yet, except Singapore, maybe Malaysia, so the English-speaking countries. But talk about Vietnam, which is our biggest market in South Asia at the moment. You just don't have this availability of talent. But then there are companies still, they say, we want to do local for local. So this is just their policy, and they do it in each and every country. But I would always suggest to look individually on the company. You know, what kind of products, how mature are you, where is your board level on Asia, how much experience they have with Asia. So basically, how do you lead your teams? How often do you visit the region? And based on this, I would decide. I'm not a friend of basically same for sure. We never say it's either this or that. It's either only localization or work with a lot of experts. I think it doesn't work. We need to see it individually, based again on the product, on the maturity of the company. But still, I know companies that do only local for local. So I just visited a company here in Germany this week. They have 8,000 people in each and every country in the world, and they only do local for local. It's like the way they do it. And other companies, basically, they mix up their teams. In South Asia, again, I would say you still have a lot of Westerners at the top of the company. Again, also due to the lack of talent there.
Interesting. Okay, let's switch the topic over into a bit of your private lives. I know you both have to go on a lot of business trips, right? How do you actually manage having a private life, family, and still succeeding all around the world?
I think the recipe is not to regard this as a job, to basically regard this as a part of your life, hopefully a fun part of your life. It's not always sunshine, right? And when we talk about this job, it requires a lot of efforts. You're traveling a lot. You have to work during weekends, right? You're going to meet people during weekends, in the after hours, so in the evening. So it requires a lot of efforts and I would say time management. Also, a partner who's supporting this, right? So I would say to balance this, you need to see the bright side of this job. So I know a lot of people sitting opposite to me with a very high salary who are not happy. And I'm asking myself, do I want to be in his position, earning a lot of money but not being happy? And I said, no, definitely not. So my recommendation in general, choose a job where you can enjoy the good part, the good side of your job. And this is something where I think that you need to have this kind of course, also this kind of passion to do this job. And I think I also have people who are applying for a job in our company. And my question always is, why do you want to do this? Right? Because at the end of the day, for your career, this might be a one-way street because we're very much specialized on recruitment. So I can suggest or recommend this job to people who enjoys dealing with people, yeah, and who finds a passion for this job, right? I think the most important or the most enjoyable part for myself is to create this win-win-win situation. So I can help my client to solve a problem. I can help a candidate to find a very good job. And at the end of it, I also get paid. Right? This is this kind of win-win-win situation with no loser.
Nice. Martin, what about you?
Yes, so talking about the job, same as Xiao, I do really enjoy the job. Yeah, so I've been working in this industry since graduation, so basically 20 years. So there were only a few times when I thought, maybe I should consider something different, but that was pretty much at the beginning of the career. But after this, I've been really enjoying my job. Of course, it's a job, but it's a job that I really like, and you need a lot of passion. In general, I think you need to balance, yeah, of course, between job and private life. And what I do a lot of sports. So especially since I've been living in Germany now, I do a lot of running in the morning before the job. And then, of course, I have two rather small kids that keep me pretty occupied. But it's good to not only look at your mobile phone or not always look at your laptop in the evening, but have some distance from the job to be refreshed and motivated in the morning or on the next day. That's important, I would say.
Can you share with us any habits that make you happy and successful? I mean, beyond of what you have already said, because I've realized that a lot of successful people, they all have like a morning routine or some kind of, I don't know, some habits to stay high in their mindset, or I don't know.
I wouldn't say it's a habit. It's some kind of an attitude which has evolved in these many years that I've been doing this job. Because in this world as a headhunter, every day is different. Yeah, every day bears different challenges, different surprises, and my habit, so to say, or let's say my attitude is to embrace this, to see go to the office with a positive mindset, regardless of what is going to happen. I know that sometimes there are some projects which might not run smoothly, right? And I know I need to settle or handle certain problems, but in general, go there with a positive mindset, embrace these kind of challenges and surprises, and then look forward to it, basically.
I love it. Martin?
Again, it's very simple. I don't have many hobbies, so I don't play golf. I don't paint a picture, so I've always been to sports. Actually, I come from soccer, but due to the age, my body doesn't allow me anymore. But again, I do my running. I take a cold shower in the morning, then I'm ready for work. And if I have a hobby, then it's watching a football game. So I'm really a football fanatic. I'm a Bayern Munich supporter, and I love watching football any time of the day and the night.
Nice. Yeah, well, I look forward to that one day I can celebrate some carnival with you guys in Düsseldorf. I would look forward to that. we're slowly closing today's podcast. What would be your last advice for our listeners?
Well, I mean, from the professional point of view, of course, this is also what we're facing. It's also, of course, downturns in the business. Is that you cannot compare basically, or let's say there's a lot of companies that are doing headhunting or search companies, but the level of service is so different. Yeah, so the advice of what people should not do, especially internal HR person, they tend to compare, let's say, Apple with peers. Yeah, I think that's what we say in German, maybe also in English. Yeah, and this is just not right. It's just the wrong approach. It also doesn't help you in getting your problem solved. But a lot of HR people, especially also in Asia, because they're very cost driven, they tend to compare and then say, well, why should I pay you X if I get it there for Y? That's whatever. But the service you get is totally different. And at the end, as we all know, I think if there's one key factor in any company, it doesn't matter if you sell technology or furniture, it's the people that are running the company, that are working in the company. So I'm sometimes really surprised that a lot of HR colleagues, people, they're so savvy or they're saving so much on these kind of services and always try to get the best deal and no commitment and this kind of I pay peanuts, I get monkeys attitude. This is something that has always followed me the whole life, and we still have these moments when we have this discussion.
Thank
Yes,
you for
and let
sharing,
me
Martin.
perhaps also add, perhaps I give one advice for companies and one advice for individuals. Let's start with the company, and then I also just take Martin's point to understand that nowadays, in a very competitive world, that where the products are very similar regarding the quality, prices are very transparent. So what are the difference makers? People are the difference makers. And I'm very surprised sometimes how some companies handle the recruitment affairs. So here my advice is really understand, first of all, that people are the most important asset of a company. As Martin just said, they run the company, they are responsible for innovations, they do the service, they build up networks, right? They sell the product and promote the product. They gain trust, or the clients have trust to these people who are representing the company. So this is my advice for companies. For individuals, I would say very simple. I have a lot of candidates. They are unhappy. I do understand sometimes if I were in their position, I would also be unhappy. But I would say also think about and look at the company and what you might appreciate. So look at the positive side. Because the grass is not always greener on the other side. So here's really think about be grateful for whatever you have achieved, maybe also with the help of a company, but always think about carefully that lots of things are not as bad as you might see, as you might feel.
Thank you so much. All right, we're closing today's podcast. Guys, sharing is caring. If you love today's podcast, please send it to your friends. And if you are looking for a headhunter, recruitment company, now you know Hsiao and Martin from JP Contagi. Reach out to them, and I wish you all a great day, no matter where you are in the world. Thank you, Martin and Hsiao, for your time.